What's up, everybody? Derek Lambert here, MythVision. I'm the host. Welcome back. If you're new, if you've been here before, if you're new here, welcome for your first time. I'm still at my mother-in-law's, and I will be heading back home tomorrow. My wife wanted to spend one more day with her mom. Don't blame her. I wanted to talk about eyewitnesses. My goodness, how often do we hear from apologetics online, specifically Christian apologetics, because that's the people defending these claims that trustworthy eyewitness testimony is in the New Testament, then they usually squeeze in wouldn't die for a lie kind of stuff, right? We hear this all the time. We also hear, and I've got some responses. My goodness, just being here at my mother-in-law's has been amazing because it's given me time to come across more material from Catholic PhD apologists and others that when you listen to it, it's not honest. I'm just going to be real with you. It's not honest. It's not actually engaging with the ancient world and the material of the ancient world. For example, and we'll probably dive deeper into this, and I hope everybody who's tuning in hits the like button, shares this out there, subscribes, drops some comments. For example, how often do we hear, well, the Gospels are written in Roman biography? They leverage that as though that means historical or proves some type of historical validity, reliability, you name it. And all you have to do is a quick Google search to Plutarch. Look at the lives of Romulus. He wrote a biography of Romulus, who was most likely a fictional invented character. He wrote a biography in the same kind of genre that arguments from scholars point out, like, hey, the Gospels are written in biography, Roman biography. Romulus, a fictional character, has a life, a story about his life. Guess who else has one? Homer, which most classicists who read the Homeric epics don't think Homer was really a historical person. They think it was a collection of bards and people who wrote down some of the oral traditions of the Greeks and such, but later you get with Plutarch, biographies. He also wrote biographies of historical people. And even in many of those historical people's biographies, there are fiction, there is legend, there is imitation of older Greek legends and myths and all the fun stuff that you find in the Gospels. It does not heighten up the historical reliability of the Gospels. You have to examine the material. It at least helps us understand the genre. Sure, it's a biography written in prose and all of that, but it does nothing to move the needle on is it historical or not, in light of the fact that there are many biographies written by the similar people that we are trying to compare the Gospels to, like Plutarch, writing fictional stories about people who never existed, as if they did. As if their lives really were, accounted for in these biographies. So you got to take that stuff with a grain of salt, right? I didn't come here today to discuss biographies. I did not come here to exhaust that kind of material. I came here to take a journey into other claims by other characters in the ancient world. And I want to say up front that Richard C. Miller really put this on the map for me. If it weren't for the work of Richard C. Miller, who actually started to do the hard work, showing translation fable tropes, comparing the eyewitness claims, the missing bodies, even alternative endings for these particular characters that are being written about, if it weren't for those comparisons, I don't know if I would have come across this and ever caught this. So Resurrection and Reception in Early Christianity, must read. Thank you, Dr. Richard C. Miller. If you catch this, we plan on doing a live stream at some point and letting him elucidate further because, when you're engaging the apologetic world, they approach this as historical, this happened. And oftentimes when I'm arguing or bringing argumentation critiques to that world, I assume that approach. Richard C. Miller would say, we need to question our post-Enlightenment history happened, literal ideas onto these ancient texts. We map these modern empirical, this had to have happened, this literally took place as it's written. They're trying to tell you what really happened approach back here. Other scholars take different approaches. If you're interested in looking at this, How the Gospels Became History, M. David Litwood takes an approach where he believes the Gospels are written as they want you to think they happened, but they're myth. So go read Richard C. Miller's Resurrection and Reception. Go read M. David Litwood's book on How the Gospels Became History. There's also a critique that was written by Dr. Miller about that position. So they've debated, in a sense, the ideas, but they're very close in a way, other than Miller would argue that later they started to do historiological claims for the Christian, message. And so either way you slice it, wherever you land on this, you got to read up on that debate. I think it's worth checking out. Others like Robin Faith Walsh would look at this and go, these are Greco-Roman wannabe elites writing stories about Jesus, and you go from there. We're going to travel into like 18 to 20 other examples of other ancient figures who die and appear to people after they're dead, or ascend to heaven and have eyewitnesses who saw it, because the Christian claim in today's circles specifically, and maybe in the ancient worlds, is that we have eyewitnesses. And this raises as evidence the credibility of our religious faith. And most, I think, of the Christians online that I've engaged don't, and I'm not saying all of them, they don't really know these sources we're going to talk about today. Most of them. Now, there are some who know of them, but it's like they will find anything. I mean, sure, they'll find some of the sources I bring up today are maybe an additional 30, 40 years, after the time the Gospels were written. So there's a greater distance between the events that are supposedly depicted in the Gospels, right? Or a greater distance by the account of maybe one of the figures I'm going to bring up, and compare that to the Gospels. Well, which one's better? 40 years or 80 years? Of course, 40 years is a better one, right? But 40 years, 30 years, and then they pretend that legend doesn't happen overnight, or you can't craft fictional stories. You got 30 years, 20, 30 years before we see the first written literature about this character. Kind of wild to me. The kind of standards that are there when it's their faith, yes. But when you go to the other ones, if it's 20, 30, 40 years more than that, nope, dismiss. And it's kind of wild to me because we've lost so much and not all has been preserved. Imagine if we didn't have everything lost, what the ancient world might actually show. All of those Asclepius healing miracles and stuff that were etched by people who were actually healed by Asclepius, supposedly. These were eyewitnesses writing in stone, etching in stone some of this stuff, right? My goodness, right? I don't buy it, but based on that standard of testimony is convincing to them, I can't imagine something else is going on emotionally or psychologically. That's why I'm guilty of psychoanalyzing, because I know what it was like to be full-blown committed and die hard for Jesus. I know what it was like to just go and commit and believe and have the most ecstatic experiences of my life in worship and praise and all of that. I know. So it's hard for me not to map my experience as a devout Christian onto other Christians and saying they are not deeply committed psychologically and emotionally, and then need to defend their already committed faith. And by doing so, they either don't know or, will find every excuse to not accept the other claims. And then even when you show them, and some of them have on record, friends of mine, I'm not going to name names, friends of mine who are Christian apologists, have gone on record going, but you know what? The Christian worldview actually allows for other pagan miracles to happen. It isn't closed off to that because demons could do these things, or other, we allow for this world with demons, right? Or spirits and angels and things like that in between. They could do those things. And it's damn, there's no falsifying this one. You know what I mean? You can't, I can't show you if Asclepius does the miracles and heals or whatever, and Jesus does it, well, that's okay because demons could do that too. Oh, long before Jesus, by the way. What? Anyway, Bauckham, thank you for the super chat. I really, really appreciate the support and being a member. Sorry for leaving you hanging. Wanted to get a little long-winded, some of that information out for people who might be tuning in. This might be your first time checking some of this stuff out. So I think it's important that, I'm making it clear. You said, I've come to the conclusion that the New Testament rewrites the Essenes' history as Paul's Christianity took over after the temple fall. Clement called Paul a liar. I know that the pseudo-Clementine literature calls Paul, deceptive. I just would need to know the exact source in Clement you're talking about, but interesting to say New Testament rewrites the Essenes' history as Paul's Christianity. I'd like to see that drawn out a little more. I'm reading this book right now, and I've been showing you guys lately, First Century Radical. This is an interview I'm going to be doing soon, and I tell you, it's a fun read. But as far as it's hard for me to wrap my head around how it's rewriting the Essenes' history. Jewish movements have similar commonality. The Essenes seem to have a lot they share in common with what early Jewish Christians seem to have had. So I just need to see a strong case of what you're trying to describe. I know that James Tabor has spent quite some time showing the commonalities, the parallels between the Qumran sect. I don't know if you want to call them the Essenes, because I know that's a scholarly debate. Consensus seems to call them Essenes, but some scholars argue that much of the material that was in the temple made its way down into the Qumran caves and escaping what happened around the time of the Roman-Jewish War. So there's this interesting kind of dialogue with academics about this issue, but there are differences between what the Essenes taught and believed and early Christians as described in the Gospels. So I don't know. I don't know. There are a lot of overlaps. There are a lot of differences. I don't know if you've checked out James Tabor on that. It's worth doing so. And then Bauckham again with another 5. Thank you so much for the super chat. The War Scrolls and the Damascus document may have the first Christian's history. The Dead Sea Scrolls, Habakkuk commentary as well. So I don't actually push the Christians back into the Qumran material. I know this is something that trying to think of his name. He does James, the brother of the Lord, a lot. Help me out in the chat, someone else who might know about this. But I don't date some of this material that I think the consensus of scholars is much of this material is 1st century BCE, not 1st century AD or 1st century the Common Era. So I'm very cautious on assuming they're the same group. But there is a tradition, a continued tradition. In fact, in this book, giving a little spoilers away, he argues that when Josephus talks about the 4th philosophy, you have the Pharisees, you have the Sadducees, you have the Essenes. There's a 4th philosophy. He doesn't even name them. He doesn't even want to give them too much credit because they're a toxic, nationalistic movement, a philosophy. He argues that Jesus and the Christians are actually that 4th philosophy, not the Essenes. And the way that Josephus describes these people from the 4th philosophy is they would torture to death. They could be tortured to death and not recant, not stop. They will be committed martyrs to the end. All of these things. Anyway, he goes through many, many arguments to point out why he thinks Jesus is, and the Christians, these Jewish Christian movement, were part of that 4th philosophy that gets damned by Josephus. Worth checking out. You'll see the interview soon. But it is interesting that Josephus describes this 4th philosophy with Judas the Galilean, and of course, Jesus coming from Galilee, from Nazareth specifically. So there's some interesting stuff. I don't want to give away too much of his thunder. Michael's going to come on himself and explain this, and we're talking experts from Oxford that are going to go into detail. But I'm curious to see what you have here. Maybe you'll hear this and go, "Holy crap! I changed my mind." I don't know. We'll see. But Bauckham, thank you so much for that super chat. If you can hear me loud and clear, and everybody's having a good day, I hope, please press 1 and comment that in the chat. I want to see a bunch of 1s just to see what's going on in the chat here. Everybody, press 1 if audio's working, if you're seeing everything clearly, everything's going well. And I want to just make sure we're good before I end up sharing screen, start getting into some of the sources, talking about some of the data. And okay, we're seeing some of Live's lessons. I see you with the 1. Legend of Matt in the house. Iowan, I think it's Iowan or Lawan. I'm not sure how to pronounce it. I'm not sure if that's an L or I, but thank you so much for being here. Let's see. Ghost Samurai, Exa Music, Chuckles, Von Hia. I think I said that right. Catastrophe or Catastrophe. I don't know if I'm saying that right. Sharia Cox, one in the house with Theophilus, the God-fearer, the God-lover. That one here with Carlo, and then Lepi. I'm going to butcher that. Amen Ra in the house. Derek, I admire your great work and passion. Thank you so much, Amen Ra. May we light a few candles to you, my friend. Seriously, though, thank you for that super chat. That really, really kicks butt. It inspires me and makes me want to keep doing these things because, look, at the end of the day, I want to understand more as much as I can. And anyway, thank you so much. We got a bunch more ones here, and I'm going to come back to pop your super chat up to give you some more time on the screen here. I really appreciate that. Roger in the house, Bauckham, of course, Doc, Kyle, Angel. We got someone who's not having the best day here. Jack, Peter, Emin, of course, my brother AP here. James, thank you so much. All right, I'm putting him back on the screen for a second. Let me share with you some interesting stuff, ladies and gentlemen. They died and were witnessed again. Now, maybe not every single example details that exact emphasis of death, but there are implications in some of these, and the idea that they do actually are understood to be gone in some way and appear. There's the suggestion they are dead, all of this kind of stuff. Really cool. I'm going to end up putting this stuff on my members only and Patreon for those who are interested in like being able to check out this better. I mean, it's very organized. It's going to have a lot of interesting material in it, so you can actually go through yourself and check out the sources, because I do a lot of these very important live streams and shows, and there's so much material that people don't really know about. So let's get into it. The ancient world's resurrection traditions and the special pleading problem. I will do my best to jump back and forth every once in a while in case you've dropped a super chat. I do not want to leave anybody hanging. And again, Amen Ra, thanks for the 20, my friend. I'm going to drop it now so everybody can see what's on the screen. Okay. If the Gospels and Paul's letters are credible witnesses to the miraculous, what do we do with the dozens of structurally identical cases from the ancient world? A comprehensive scholarly examination. Now, I would like to turn this into a documentary or something like that, and I'll elaborate more, probably sharpen the arguments. This is just kind of a rough draft here. There is an argument you will hear from Christian apologists repeated on stages and debates and podcasts and in best-selling books. It goes something like this. If Jesus had not risen from the dead, the disciples would have known it. But they didn't just claim he rose. They claimed to have seen him. Multiple people, named people, 500 at once, some of whom are still alive when Paul writes. You can go check. This is not myth. This is reportable, verifiable eyewitness history. Nothing like it exists anywhere else in the ancient world. That is the argument, ladies and gentlemen. And on the surface, it sounds compelling. It sounds like something with real evidentiary weight, but there is a problem with it, a significant one, and that problem is the ancient world itself. Because the ancient world is absolutely full of people who died and were seen again. Full of people, at least written, okay? At least they're written in text, in stories, in literature. Same thing we have as evidence from the New Testament. It's literature, as if they died and were seen again. Full of people whose bodies vanished from known locations. Full of crowds who witnessed figures ascend to heaven. Full of named witnesses who swore under oath to post-death appearances. Full of cults, temples, inscriptions, and annual festivals commemorating exactly these kinds of events. And when you lay those cases out next to the claims about Jesus, using exactly the same criteria the apologists use, something uncomfortable happens. The argument for the uniqueness of Jesus collapses. What remains is not evidence. What remains is special pleading. Now, Now, of course, this is rhetorical here, but the argument that these texts are evidence, and you could say they're evidence, of course, they're claiming to be evidence. Well, now you got to weigh in all sorts of other evidence. Now you've got to bring in all sorts of material. And I think that's the importance of comparing Christianity to the ancient world. Now, if this evidence is not sufficient to establish that Romulus rose from the dead or came back from the dead, then why is structurally identical evidence sufficient to establish that Jesus did? And you got to get Resurrection and Reception in Early Christianity by Richard C. Miller. This is an important problem we have even today with online Christian apologists, in my opinion, is they want to divide the pagan world from the Jewish world in a way that I would say the cutting edge critical scholars today that are working on this material have already seen the flaws in this. You do not say, oh, they only came from Jewish source material. That's it. It's unfortunate. I don't want to get into all the weeds here in this live stream, but it's really unfortunate that a lot of people are allergic. Back in the early 1900s, 1800s, scholars were looking for Greek parallels and pagan parallels to everything. And they had in their mind, a lot of them, that Jesus was so radically breaking away from Jewish Torah, all of this, that it's all pagan. They were looking at pagan stuff, that Christianity was so elbowed away from Judaism that there was no reason to look to the Jewish material for the most part. They were looking to pagan parallels. Eventually, Dead Sea Scrolls come in. We find Nag Hammadi literature. We started to shift, and the tides changed. And then it became, well, actually, there's a lot of Jewish parallel. There's a lot of Jewish material we can look to. And when that pendulum swung, there are still scholars stuck on that side of the argument and have not come back to the middle, a balanced position that allows for both worlds to be adopted, to accommodate both worlds. And I just think any common sense person would suggest that if a movement is being dominated in the Greco-Roman world, pagan world in scare quotes, you would expect them to have ideas that are prevalent, popular, and are likely to take off for those pagans. So there is a good reason to say, let's take a balanced approach and look to both worlds. That is something before we move on. What the apologists actually claim, okay? Start with the text at the center of this discussion, 1 Corinthians 15, verses 3 through 8. This is the earliest written claim about the resurrection appearances of Jesus. Paul writes it around 55 CE, as most scholars would argue, but he explicitly says this is not his own composition. He says he received it and passed it on. Most critical scholars date the underlying creed to within a few years of the crucifixion. Now, this is important because how does Paul know about the appearances to the 12, to Cephas, to James, to the apostles, to more than 500 at once? Where did he hear this? This is something he is being told. So now you have hearsay from someone you nor I have never met. Let me come back to me for a second. You have hearsay from someone who has hearsay from people that they know. You're reading a text that you don't even know this guy. He claims to be Paul, but we pretend we know Paul because we believe, we trust him because we had that conversion experience. We believe in Jesus. So you're trusting a text that we aren't even certain was written by Paul. Consensus of scholars think it was written by Paul. There are a small minority of people that would not fit in that position who might even question if this was interpolated. Don't know. But you don't know who Paul is. You've never met this guy. You don't know what he's really doing in the real world. You have letters written by a guy, and then he's saying this stuff about something he heard. So it's hearsay from someone you've never met who's getting hearsay from people they supposedly somehow hear this material from. And he doesn't get along with those guys in many situations in his own letters. We already have Jerry Springer going on in the New Testament. Sure, let's just trust it blindly. Hallelujah, right? No, we should be skeptical like we would any other pagan claim, but that doesn't happen with apologists. And unless they could say they've met him, and they can trust him personally and all of that, I just see every reason for pause, for doubt, for caution, and to be skeptical. All right, check in with you guys. Everybody's good. No super chats. Cool. Now let's continue. All right. Here we go. For I delivered to you as first of importance what I also received, that Christ died for our sins in accordance with the scriptures, that he was buried, that he was raised on the third day in accordance with the scriptures, and that he appeared to Cephas and then to the 12. Then he appeared to more than 500 brothers at once, most of whom are still alive, though some have fallen asleep. Then he appeared to James, then to all the apostles. Last of all, as to one untimely born, he appeared also to me. I should have kept the next verse that goes in to point out, and I worked harder than all of them. Paul brags in 1 Corinthians. In fact, I should pull that up real quick here, because there's a competition, it seems, going on while he's naming this list. And if you carefully read it, you'll see what I'm saying. Let me share my screen. Most people miss this, but I think it's important. If we're going to read this, you have to understand, right? Verse 8, and last of all, he appeared to me also as to one abnormally born or untimely born. For I am the least of apostles and do not even deserve to be called an apostle, because I persecuted the church of God. But by the grace of God, I am what I am, and his grace to me was not without effect. No, I worked harder than all of them. Yet not I, but the grace of God that was with me. Okay, flexor. You're flexing. You're whipping out your schlong with a damn tape measure saying it's bigger. It's bigger than theirs. Even though I don't deserve it, it's bigger than theirs. I worked harder than them. Most people don't catch that kind of stuff. I think it's important we do, because he's flexing. He's saying he worked harder than all of them. Anyway, the apologist builds several arguments on this text. Let me zoom in. Okay. The apologist builds several arguments on this text. Historian and New Testament scholar Gary Habermas, in The Case for the Resurrection of Jesus, co-authored with Michael Licona, I'm friends with Michael, and published by Kriegel, I think that's how you pronounce it, Publications in 2004, summarizes what he calls the minimal facts approach. The creed, he argues, is early, acknowledged even by skeptical scholars, names specific witnesses, and invites verification by living witnesses. The argument is that this combination of features is without parallel in the ancient world. New Testament scholar James Dunn, in Jesus Remembered, published by Erdmans in 2003, writes of the 1 Corinthians 15 creed, this tradition, we can be entirely confident, was formulated as tradition within months of Jesus's death. Now, I don't know how you would I don't know how you can have such certitude. Maybe I'm too skeptical, but I don't know how you can have such certitude, right? You can have maybe confidence that clearly something was developed there, maybe early on. But if Paul's writing this 20 to 30 years later, how can you be so confident that you know this tradition that we're reading actually developed right there, was formulated within a few months of Jesus's death? I don't know. I don't know how you can have that kind of certainty, okay? But this is what he says. And then you have theologian N.T. Wright in The Resurrection of the Son of God, published by Fortress Press in 2003. He asserts, this evidence is as strong as anything in ancient history. These scholars are being cited in good faith, but notice what the argument requires. It requires that no comparable evidence exists anywhere else. It requires that mass witness claims, named individual witnesses, and rapid community formation around a post-death figure are so unusual that only genuine miracle can explain them. That requirement is the problem, because the ancient world did not cooperate with that premise. And there is so much evidence in the ancient world to validate what I'm arguing here. So real quick, going to super chats. I see we have Toronto in the house. Thank you, Toronto, for the super chat. If you reject Paul in 1 Corinthians 15 as hearsay, do you also reject Tacitus, Plutarch, Arian? They're also not eyewitnesses for much of what they report. So this is a good question, actually. I'm glad you asked this, because I don't know Paul. I don't know Tacitus. I don't know Plutarch. I don't know Arian. I don't know these people individually. So I want to get the drift of my critique of this kind of approach. You don't know them either, okay? But how trustworthy are they? And what are they claiming? Is it difficult to claim that there was a guy who was a rebel rouser, someone who was problematic, who was, spreading this very bad superstition that you in the Roman world despise and don't like? That's not so ridiculous to me. In fact, some would even go so far as to say it's not ridiculous to claim people were witnessing things. The Greek word there, and I'm going to get into it, for the whole witnessing or seeing, is a common visionary term used in the Septuagint for many of the prophets who are having visions in the Old Testament. Not physical, tangible, this guy's right here. Hey, what's up, Jesus? Check it out. Tell them what you think, Jesus. What do you think about that? Yeah, let them know. No, it's visionary experiences. And this is even, Gerd Ludiment, which loves to get quoted by apologists all the time because he's an atheist who grants some of this stuff early on. So I am cautious, period, as I know that they invented eyewitnesses in the ancient world. But that's because I've read enough. And you and I have had back and forth, Toronto, plenty of times on stream where you'll say something, I'll bring up a source like Nero Redivivus, and you're like, what, Nero coming back from the dead? What are you talking about? Then you shift it, you shift the goalpost and go, well, see, you read all these things most people don't. Yeah, I agree. Thank you. Because when you read and know that they're making up claims of eyewitnesses, and you know that some people may have had authentic experiences claiming they saw things, whether visionary or not, you have both. You have made up stuff. You have stuff that may be authentic to some degree. What do you do with that? Why do we run to, it must be authentic? I'll tell you why Christians do it, and you know this, because they would never die for a lie. Even though Joseph Smith did, just so you know, Joseph Smith was martyred for something that I think he fabricated, which tells me about the psychology of humans, this whole trilemma that C.S. Lewis brings up, liar, lunatic, or Lord. This is problematic because humans are complex beings. We can make up shit and yet still die on the hill of stuff we made up. And I think the more we study that, we'll understand, hey, maybe we don't have it all figured out. But I say that to say, I can grant that maybe there were some experiences early on, post-bereavement potentially, whatever, if you want to go that way. I can also go the other way of saying, yeah, I'm not so sure, because eyewitnesses were fabricated often in the ancient world as a pedigree for a cult. Establishing cults often came with them eyewitnesses. Just look at the Roman imperial cult. Have you read about the ascensions of the Caesars? Have you read about these post-mortem appearances on Roman roads by the Caesars? If you haven't read those primary sources, then what would you do if you saw those? Hopefully we can get into some of this today. I'm actually going to reserve some of this for when I interview Dr. Richard C. Miller, when we go deeper into the weeds, because he has this all documented in his book, Resurrection and Reception in Early Christianity. Now we're going back. Thank you so much for that, Toronto. I appreciate the super chat. Okay, critical note on the text itself. Before we turn to the parallels, we need to acknowledge what the text actually says, because apologists routinely slide past several things that matter enormously. First, Paul explicitly says he received this tradition. The Greek verb paralibon, meaning he received it from someone else. He is a relay station, not a first-hand investigator. He never claims to have interviewed any of the 500. He does not name a single one of them. Second, the word translated as appeared is the Greek aphthe from horao. I'm hoping I pronounced horao properly. This is the standard Septuagint term for prophetic visions throughout Jewish literature. It appears in Daniel, in Ezekiel, in Isaiah. It does not inherently mean a physical encounter. Even the skeptical German historian Gerd Ludiment, we always hear his name, right, whose early dating of the creed the apologists love to cite, is explicit about this in his 1995 book, What Really Happened to Jesus, published by Westminster John Knox Press. Ludiment writes, the purpose of this is probably, on the one hand, to provide historical support for the resurrection of Jesus. More than 500 witnesses all at once cannot be wrong. And if anyone was still skeptical about what they had heard, they could ask them directly, since most of them were still alive. Third, the group of 500 appears nowhere else in the New Testament, not in Mark, not in Matthew, even though some argue there's an interesting tradition, or this idea of scholars who think that Matthew might be indicating there was witnesses on a mountain in Galilee who had a visionary experience. Who knows? Not in Luke. It doesn't mention 500, and it doesn't give us any of the detail. And not in John, not in Acts. There is another argument that the 500, and I can't remember the Greek word for 500 in Greek, but there's some who've argued that Pentecost and 500 has some linguistic overlap. Not sure if that's been falsified or if there's anyone in the chat who might know some Greek better than I do, of course, and they could tell a little bit more about that hypothesis with those who might be in the chat debating and arguing on this live stream. But there are some who've argued that maybe Pentecost comes from this overlap. Who knows? And by the way, if you go read the book of Acts, you'll find the Holy Spirit and these like visionary kinds of experiences, and they're ecstatic and they're speaking in tongues. People think they're drunk. They're accusing them of being drunk, which makes me think of the Maenads. Anyway, that's a whole nother rabbit trail into Greco-Roman parallels. But anywho, let's keep going. So this is extraordinary if it were a well-known verifiable event. The New Testament scholar James McGrath, which I've interviewed several times on my channel, in The Burial of Jesus, History and Faith, published by Book Surge in 2008, writes, "We do not know whether Paul heard this story directly from someone who was of those 500 individuals allegedly present on that occasion, nor can we ascertain whether all of those present on that occasion, if there was indeed such an occasion, were all in agreement according or regarding the nature of the experience they had." Which we don't really know anything about these people. We just get the hearsay from a guy who's getting hearsay from others. We don't have, I mean, maybe he talked to someone who told him this, but you just trust people who tell you stuff like that. You know, you got to be, I'm skeptical of claims. My brother sees UFOs all the time in the sky. He claims that they are extraterrestrials. He claims that, you know, they're really messing with us. Sorry, I'm much more skeptical. I'm much more cautious. I'm just not, I'm not quick to buy into it. So, coming back to you real quick here. What's up, everybody? Everybody good? All right. Checking the chat. Okay. Let's see. Nope, nobody did the nobody checked out that Greek claim that I was talking about. It's all good. It's all good. We're going to keep going. Okay. Fourth, the phrase "most of whom are still alive" does not mean Paul is inviting the Corinthians to travel to Judea. Craig Keener, in his new Cambridge Bible commentary on 1st and 2nd Corinthians, published by Cambridge University Press in 2005, notes, "The claim that many of the over 500 on one occasion remained alive probably constituted an invitation to consult them if one wished and had funds for travel. For appeals to public knowledge, compare Josephus against Appian," and he gives a source. That last note is crucial. Josephus uses the same rhetorical strategy. Paul is doing something conventional, not something unique. With all of that on the table, let's turn to the ancient world. I by the way, Craig Keener is very conservative in his commentary on the book of Acts as well. So he doesn't just talk about Paul. This guy's talking about the book of Acts, all sorts of stuff. By the way, side note about North Carolina, where I'm at right now, I am sweating. Oof, there's a damn hornet. I am sweating like crazy out here. It is hot today. Hopefully it doesn't get down to freezing temps or cold temps for me later. But we'll see. We'll see. Yeah. So yeah, that's there's an argument that the 500 in Greek, the 500, I guess, has commonality with that. Pentecost, there's scholars who thought maybe there's some connection between the two. All right, here we go. Continuing. Bear with me. Okay, let's turn to the cases. All right. Romulus, founder of Rome. This is important. I can't explain all of it in the stream. Why Romulus is so important, apart from the fact that the entire Roman imperial cult is inspired by this as well. Okay, so this long-standing tradition. We're going to go through primary sources, and there's all sorts of primary sources here that cover this. We begin with a case that is structurally closest to the resurrection of Jesus, and which was being cited by ancient authors as a parallel to the Jesus tradition before the ink was dry on the Gospels. Romulus was the legendary founder and first king of Rome. His story was told across at least 5 major independent ancient sources, written over a span of several centuries, all drawing on earlier material. The story, as Plutarch tells it in the life of Romulus, runs as follows. Romulus was presiding over a public assembly at the Goat's Marsh. A sudden violent storm arose, the sky went dark, and Romulus disappeared. No body was found. Plutarch, in a passage of extraordinary significance for our argument, then immediately groups the Romulus tradition with other recognized examples of the same pattern. And this is Plutarch. Now, this is like the fables which the Greeks tell about Aristeas of Proconesus and Cleomedes of Astipalea. For they say Aristeas died in a fuller's workshop, and his friends coming to look for him found his body vanished, and that some presently after, coming from abroad, said they met him traveling toward Croton or Croton. Not sure the proper way to pronounce that. So the story goes, Aristeas, and we'll probably cover him in depth too, Aristeas of Proconesus dies in a fuller's shop. The fuller closes up the shop, locks the building. No one can get in. You know, think of stone in front of the tomb. No one gets in, no one gets out, that kind of thing. He's dead. He goes to find the family of this guy. And, of course, when they come back and they open the fuller's shop, which it was locked, his body's missing. And then people say they saw him on a road traveling to a different place. So he was dead, but now he's not dead. So he equates the whole idea of Romulus, who's dead, or they say he's dead, he's missing. And, of course, he ends up having appearances, but we're going to get into that. So Plutarch is already aware that Romulus' story follows a recognizable literary pattern. He is citing parallel cases in the same breath. The appearance to Julius Proculus is then described. Julius Proculus, a man of noble birth and of virtuous character. He's not a liar, ladies and gentlemen. This guy tells the truth, and he's noble. Mounted the rostra and solemnly swore by the most sacred emblems that he had seen Romulus ascending to heaven in his armor, and heard him command that the Romans should hereafter style him Quirinius. Livy's account in Ab Urb Cadita 1:16 adds critical details. He records that the senators around Romulus claimed he was carried into heaven by a divine force, but that there were present rumors among the common people that he had been murdered by the senators. Does that sound familiar, ladies and gentlemen? The same binary of miraculous ascension versus deliberate human action appears in Matthew 28:11-15, where the Jewish authorities bribe soldiers to say the disciples stole the body. Livy writes, the Roman soldiers, when the tempest had passed away and the sunshine had returned, seeing the royal seat vacant, though they readily believed the assertion of the senators who had been standing next to him, that he had been caught up on high in the blasts, nevertheless remained for some time sorrowful and silent, as if filled with the fear of orphanhood. Then, after a while, they all with one accord held Romulus as a god born of a god, king and father of the city of Rome. So the parallel to the resurrection narrative is structural and point by point. Body disappears. Competing explanations emerge. A single individual testifies under oath to a post-death glorious appearance. A commission is delivered. Divinity is proclaimed. A cult is established. Scholar Richard C. Miller, very good friend of mine, in his landmark 2015 book, Resurrection and Reception in Early Christianity, published by Routledge, argues at length that the gospel resurrection narratives belong to the established Greco-Roman genre of the translation fable, of which the Romulus story is the paradigmatic example. And he writes, the Gospel's resurrection accounts follow the conventions of the Greco-Roman translation fable, a literary genre in which a hero's body disappears, witnesses are confused or flee, and a posthumous appearance delivers a commission. The shock of the Gospels must not then have been the presence of this standard literary trope, but the adaptation of such supreme cultural exaltation to an indignant, I'm butchering this, crucified Jew. You understand, you see it on the screen here. So Richard Miller has identified, and I'm going to come back to you for a minute here, not leaving anybody hanging, if I can get this thing to work. Okay, my computer's in the sun. My computer's in the sun. I'm scooting forward a little bit here. Okay. So Richard C. Miller knows that the Romulus story was so popular. Okay. So popular that this is exactly what they imitate Julius Caesar and Augustus Caesar and all these Caesars by deifying them after their death in the Roman world. This was a very popular fable, and there were eyewitnesses who witness Romulus, right? They swear, they make a vow. They're noble, they're trustworthy. Yet you don't believe that Romulus really did these things. Of course, you would just say, nope, I'm going to look to the classicists, and they think Romulus probably didn't exist. This tradition is centuries older than Jesus. And it was so important that that imperial cult literally modeled much of their stories about the Caesars after this very thing. And then you get scholars who come along and see Roman imperial competition going on in the Gospel of Mark with Jesus. You know, I think of Adela Yarbrough Collins, Dr. Collins, who wrote a commentary on Mark, and others too, that identifies some of that Roman imperial stuff. Pretty important, but they're not the only ones. There's several academics who highlight this material, and I think to myself, do you think there was something in the air? You know, I can feel it coming in the air tonight. So I think, looking at the well-known established tropes of the Greco-Roman world, we can see, why would they have the tomb empty? Which Paul doesn't have, by the way. Paul has him buried. No empty tomb scene. Bodies missing. It goes further than that. Romulus also terrified the people, and they scatter. They flee out of fear when this happens. So there's another issue in Mark, right? That the women are afraid and they tell no one. Well, that's another trope that you find that parallels the stories. Okay. Let me continue. I wanted to check on everybody, make sure we're caught up. Nobody's left hanging. And in case you're wondering, I'm not saying Romulus did these things. I'm not saying any of them did. I'm saying they wrote stories about these things. So here we go. Picking up where we left off. Got to check out Richard C. Miller's book, Resurrection and Reception. All right. Here's the detail that closes the apologetic argument on this case entirely. Early Christian apologists themselves cited it as a parallel. Cited what, Derek? What did they cite? Romulus. Church Father Tertullian, writing in his apology around 197 of the Common Era, was forced to acknowledge the comparison. Recall those who have been enrolled as gods by your own people. Read what is said in your literature about the origin of some of them. Romulus was made a god by the perjury of Proculus. The perjury. Notice how he's pooping on the tradition that isn't his. Oh, the perjury. You know, they're making up stuff. Tertullian does not deny the parallel. He attacks it. He argues the Romulus tradition involved perjury, while the Christian tradition did not. But his argument concedes the structural comparison is real. He is arguing for qualitative superiority within a recognized genre, not uniqueness. And guess who else does the same? Justin Martyr, in his first apology, chapters 21 through 23, goes even further, and he wrote earlier, right, than Tertullian, listing the Greek parallels to Jesus, explicitly including Romulus, and arguing that the difference is that the Christian story happened more recently. Great argument. We've just got through Romulus. I mean, that's the first case. Hold on. Let me take a quick walk for a second. I'm melting out here. Bear with me. Woo! Oh, snap. it's either hot out here or I'm cooking the shit out of some apologetics right now. So both can be true at the same time, though. Hallelujah. All right, I'm checking the chat out. Everybody here, I can't even tell you how hot it is out here. I might have to get down into my damn. I don't want to get down into my damn tank top, but anyway. So Romulus again gets paralleled by Christian apologists early on themselves. That's kind of a big deal. Kind of a big deal. He's not the only one that Christians parallel to. There are others. There are others. But of course, remember, those ones didn't happen. We can't trust them. We can trust a text written by a guy who says his name is Paul. Never met the guy. Don't know what he was really doing Monday through Friday, or really probably if he even kept the Sabbath for real. Monday through Sunday, let's just say. We don't know what this guy was doing. We don't know him. We just hear him saying in his works, I am not a liar. Who said you were, Paul? Who is calling you a liar? I'd like to interview that person. I'd like to know what they thought about you and why they thought that about you. We just trust your text written in your name if it really was written by you. See, I'm cautious about those things. I just am. And the reason is we have fake letters in Paul's names. Scholars have identified this for a while. It's called pseudepigraphy. Okay. So when you have fake letters, like if we had no fake letters and no scholar said, hey, there's this thing called pseudepigraphy and people were writing fake letters in the name of people, I would not even bring this up. Okay. I'd have no reason to go, well, Paul didn't write some of this stuff. I'm just saying consensus says 7 of them were written by Paul. I'll just go with the consensus for the sake of the argument. Cool. So some letters are not really him. Some letters are really him. Okay. So I just ask that when we're wanting to commit and devote our entire existence, our essence of who we are, what we stand for, how we live, what we believe, what we're going to devote our lives to, what kind of fears and not fears we have, what we're going to eat, not eat, how we behave and everything on this belief that I must believe this. Why? Because an ancient book with a guy named Paul said this guy did this thing, and that's strong evidence to you. But then when I bring other examples that are even paralleled by Christians, and of course they poop on them, you're not moved. You don't have a needle move. Either you're already committed and you're just doubling down to defend it, or I don't know. I mean, that's why I go to the psychology. Okay, got a super chat coming in. Hallelujah. Oh, nope. Bauckham, thank you so much for another super chat. If true, Paul was a Herodian. The Herodians wanted Roman favor. He would have used Roman myths to strengthen Jewish-Roman ties, promote their dynasty. This is an interesting angle. Paul is going at the Greco-Roman world, right? He's aiming at the Gentile world. I don't know what he is. I don't know if he was Herodian or not. There are people who say he was, because he says my kinsman, the Herodian, and then he goes on to describe some of these people. So some have said they think he is a kinsman biologically to the Herodian family. I don't really know for sure, but I definitely see him being all things to all men, meaning adopting pagan elements, if you will, knowing about pagan philosophy, which this has been documented as well. There's a book, oh God, what's his name? He was the Dr. Fodder of Robin Faith Walsh on Paul. I can't think of his name right now. He wrote a book on this where he sees so much, even in like Romans 7, that famous passage where he says like, the things I don't want to do, I do. And the things I do, I don't want to do. Like, there's this like internal dialogue we're reading from Paul as if Paul's struggling with a secret sin or something. Well, if you go back into the Greek world, you'll find that that's actually a well-known literary story from the Greeks in, what is the name of that play? I can't remember the name of the story, like off the top of my head here. I wish I'd have come prepared because there's so much evidence in Paul that he knows Platonic philosophy. He knows Greek material. And I'm talking in Paul's so-called authentic letters. So this guy's not a dummy. He knows the Greco-Roman world. And I think that's important to highlight with what you're suggesting here, Bauckham. And I think this is an important point that Jewish-Roman ties, Paul is going toward that broader world. And if I were trying to market in Florida at the beach. I'm not going to sell snowmobiles. I'm going to go with margaritas and tacos, okay? And people are going to buy that. So, you know, he has to somehow be accommodational to that world in some way. But I don't know about the promote their dynasty. Like if it's just like the Jewish heritage that he's promoting, maybe. I don't know about the Herodian dynasty thing, though. So maybe I'm misunderstanding some of the super chat. I really do appreciate that support, though. Thank you so much, Bauckham. Let me see. Make sure I didn't. You said he had house arrest at the Herodian palace. Yeah, that's interesting. I thought it was a Roman palace. I didn't know it was a Herodian palace. I thought it was just the Romans in Philippians that he was jailed in. But I could be wrong. I wanted to make sure I covered any follow-up. Sometimes we send super chats and then we have like additional commentary to help out. All right, let's go back to case 2. And I don't know how long I'll be able to survive being cooked in the sun here. Castor and Pollux at the Battle of Lake Regillus, or Regulus, if you want to say Regulus. I'm not sure the proper way to pronounce this term here. Several sources. All right, there's plenty of sources here. The Battle of Lake Regillus in approximately 496 BC was fought between the early Roman Republic and a Latin League. According to Roman tradition, preserved in multiple independent sources, Castor and Pollux appeared on the battlefield on white horses, turned the tide of the battle, and was then seen in the Forum in Rome announcing the Roman victory. Dionysius of Halicarnassus writes, 2 young men of great stature, in the prime of their life, of great beauty, white with horses of the same description, were seen to water their horses at the spring of Juturna in the Forum. When the people crowded around them and were asking who they were, they said they were Castor and Pollux. This is a named public multi-witness claim for a divine appearance in a specific location that was then commemorated with a major temple, an annual cavalry parade of 5,000 men, and centuries of ongoing religious practice. Scholar Amber Gartrell, in her 2021 Cambridge University Press monograph, The Cult of Castor and Pollux in Ancient Rome, documents how the Epiphany became a paradigmatic template. Their appearance at the Sicilian Battle of the River Sagra around 540 BC was so well known in Greek and Roman culture that it was invoked as a proverbial example of epiphanic manifestation in Cicero's De Natura Deorum 2:113. As such, it was the model for several Greco-Roman battle epiphanies featuring the Dioscuri and their horses, from the Lake Regillus victory in 496 BC to Constantine's at the Milvian Bridge in AD 312. That's a powerful statement. If an entire army of Roman soldiers plus Forum witnesses constitutes credible testimony to a divine appearance that was subsequently institutionalized into a 500-year religious practice, why do we require more? If we do not accept it as evidence of genuine divine intervention by Castor and Pollux, on what grounds do we accept structurally weaker evidence for Jesus? And I imagine there were more than 500 Roman soldiers on the battlefield. Now, we could tear this apart like we do Paul, right? We could go, did every soldier really claim they saw this? Or was it just a handful? But they're saying the whole army was out there. Like we could do all of the same shit that I do with Christianity. I do that exact same thing with this. But how many Christian apologists really take the time to point out the significance that this supposed witnesses of Castor and Pollux involving themselves in a war was so important that it institutionalized a cult of Castor and Pollux and a yearly memorial for over 500 years as a religious practice? That's kind of significant. Most people probably don't know about this. And it sucks. It sucks. I'm coming back to y'all. It sucks that they don't know about this. They're not taught to look at this stuff often, right? We're not supposed to. There's not a day in Sunday school I can imagine any of the cases I'm bringing up would have ever been taught, right? Number one. I don't even know if this material shows up in seminaries. There may be certain seminaries in certain places, but this shit is like classics department level material. This is like deeper comparisons that are really I think, very important in the Greco-Roman world. And Christianity was birthed in the Mediterranean world under the rule of the Roman Empire, and all the propaganda that came out of that machine, Christianity picked up a lot of it. A lot of it, okay? And it sucks because show me the last time you've seen millions of views, right, for this kind of material, and then turn on and watch the latest, podcast that goes viral where someone's just spewing turds out of their mouth for 3 hours. Just total dookie. Just, bleh. I mean, just 2-3 hours of just like, what the hell? Like, why aren't more people aware of all of this material? And why doesn't that go viral? Sucks, doesn't it, everybody? Don't you wish more of this stuff was known? I do. I do. Press 1 if you wish more of this stuff was known. I'd like to see in the chat just to get an idea, even if you're a believer, if you've never heard of this, isn't this interesting? I'd like to see. Press 1. I want to see all the ones I could possibly get in the chat. 1. Just letting me know if this interests you as much as it interests me. And we're only on case 2 right now. So there's 20 cases. And that's not exhausting it. That's just I gather together some big names, some big popular sources. But every time I hear Robin Faith Walsh or one of these classicist New Testament scholars speak, they come up with new things they found. They're like, oh, here's another source. And there's this guy, I believe he died. And then he came. And I've never heard the name before. And I'm like, what? That's interesting. I never heard of that. How much have we lost? How much have we lost? By the way, my water is 98.9 degrees right now. Okay. 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1, maybe 2, I'm different. Okay, so we got a bunch of ones in here. I really appreciate that. Let's get back to the source or sources. So, all right, we dealt with that, right? Remember Aristeas of Proconesus? This is a good one. Lots of sources that talk about this, and Herodotus being our oldest. Now, here we go. Aristeas of Proconesus is one of the most structurally detailed post-death appearance traditions in the ancient world, and it was cited by pagan philosophers and early Christian apologists alike as a direct parallel to the resurrection of Jesus. Herodotus, writing before 425 BC, describes the case in his Histories, Book 4. The story involves an empty room, multiple witnesses, and post-death appearances across different locations and time periods spanning nearly 3 centuries. In Herodotus' own words, here we go. Aristeas, they said, who belonged to one of the noblest families in the island, had entered one day into a fuller's shop when he suddenly dropped down dead. Hereupon, the fuller shut up his shop and went to tell Aristeas' kindred family what had happened. The report of the death had just spread through the town when a certain I'm going to butcher this shit, Sicinian, lately arrived from Artica, contradicted the rumor, affirming that he had met Aristeas on the road to Cyzicus and had spoken with him. While he disputed, the relations proceeded to the fuller's shop with all things necessary for the funeral, intending to carry the body away. But on the shop being opened, no Aristeas was found, either dead or alive. So notice he's on the road, and someone, after he's already said to be dead, the fuller goes to get the family. He gets the family. He's been dead, according to the chronology of the story. Then someone bumps into them and says, look, I saw him on a road just recently, like just now. And they're like, what? Come on. And they're disputing, they're arguing, it's contradicting story. Then he goes back to his shop. He's missing. His body's missing. But the fuller knew he died. So that's how that story goes. And this was in Herodotus. The empty room. the empty tomb, the funeral party arriving for the body simply not being there. This is structurally identical to the empty tomb narrative in all four Gospels. 7 years later, Aristeas reappeared and wrote a poem. Then he disappeared again. This is the funny part. Then approximately 240 years later, Aristeas appeared in Metapontum in southern Italy. Here we go. Herodotus says, the Metapontines say that Aristeas himself appeared in their land and ordered them to erect an altar to Apollo and to set up beside it a statue identified with the name of Aristeas of Proconnesus. For he said, of all the Italites, I'm not sure if I'm saying that right, it was to them alone and to their land that Apollo had come, and that he himself had followed the god, not as Aristeas as he now appeared, but then in the form of a raven. After saying this, he disappeared, and still today in their agora, the statue with the name of Aristeas stands beside the cult image of Apollo, surrounded by bay laurel trees. Post-death appearance, delivering a religious commission, founding of a cult site, physical evidence visible then Herodotus visits. Physical evidence visible when Herodotus visits. The case of Aristeas was noticed as a parallel to Jesus in the ancient world itself. The pagan philosopher Celsus, writing around 175 CE, cited Aristeas explicitly. We know this through Origen's Contra Celsum, or Celsum, Book 3, Section 26. Aristeas is said to have been seen alive after his death in a fuller's shop, and that people hundreds of years later would still see him. He was even treated with divine honors by the Metapontines by the command of Apollo. Origen's response does not deny the parallel. He argues that the disciples were eyewitnesses willing to suffer and die for their testimony. How often have we heard that one? Both of those arguments are qualitative comparisons within an acknowledged parallel, not denials that the parallels exist. So, again, coming back to you, my laptop's probably melting through the sun here. Let me see if I can turn this a little bit, get some of this, try to keep the sun from melting this computer. Okay, I'm back at you all. All right, everybody, I want to make sure my audio, because this thing, the computer's acting a little bit weird, and I don't know if it's just getting hot. Press 1 if you hear me and everything's going well. I'm setting my coat to try and cover some of the metal. This Mac has metal. Please tell me, press 1. I'm not sure if my audio and video and everything's going well, because I'm looking at my screen. It's got a delay. Okay, I see a couple ones. So we're looking good. We're looking good here. Someone said I'm yelling. Is my mic loud? Yeah, it is hot. Well, I'm outside, and this was not expected. You know, my mother-in-law right now, we're here at her house. We leave tomorrow. We didn't expect this, and I really don't have anywhere else to comfortably do this stream, because I am, improvising. And there's a house full of kids, like tons of children, so they would be loud. There's no way you'd be able to hear me well. You said it's choppy. Someone says it's choppy. Damn. I wish it wasn't so choppy, because I've got so many other examples to get through. Again, just to elaborate, though, again, Christians did not deny these parallels, and they didn't even deny that the miracles happened often of these pagans. They would say demons or devils did it long ago. They would claim that, well, that was just Satan who knew the prophecies that Jesus was going to come and fulfill the miracles of this and that. Like, they would come up with the wildest excuses for what happened. Or they would go with another one, which is more of a philosophizing excuse. And I'm picking up my phone since it fell. And that one would be Jesus was more ethically superior. So you could point to pagan stories where Heracles and all these other gods and demigods and whatnot, they did a lot of immoral things, but Jesus was good. Jesus was a good guy, and they would try to heighten him in a superior sense. However, I can't wait to share with you this episode. I know I keep plugging it, but I didn't expect to have to stay an additional day. I brought this book and only this book to read during this trip as far as paperback goes. And Jesus, maybe those who, buy hook, line, and sinker the text that they're reading of the Gospels, the way they read them, might think this. But Jesus, being a first century radical, this scholar here is going to show you he was a violent insurrectionist. Think of the best way I'd put it. This is going to be controversial, but I'm going to say it anyway. Think of Osama bin Laden. Think of airplane hijackers. Think of someone totally committed and willing to go to death, and even with violence. Okay, and I know you go, but hold on, turn the other cheek. The niceties. Just stay tuned. Just stay tuned and wait till you see. This is a Jesus that I actually am really fascinated on wanting to study more, because there's a lot of data. You might go, damn, is this showing an uglier, darker side to what was going on very early on before it failed? So there's something really, really interesting here. Ampersand 7443, thank you so much for the super chat. Is your channel for showing similar history and mythology to Christianity? Part of it is that, yes. Part of my job specifically today is going to show you other characters that the ancients themselves took serious, that were not Christians, that believed or had devotion to these cults, to these stories of characters that were deified, made into gods, had cults, celebrated, honored, told in stories, retold in stories, and passed them down generation after generation. And then, of course, we get Christianity, and we act like this one is the one, the only, the true one, and specifically the eyewitness claims. But if you ask me what my channel is for, my channel is an educational channel. My channel is to help people get a better grasp of the ancient world and to look and listen to academics. I do interviews with scholars on a regular basis and try to have a lot more of the critical approach than just every and any PhD who steps out of a seminary or might, run some conservative church or something. We have plenty of apologist channels that interview the Gary Habermas's of the day and the NT Wrights. Maybe I incorporate some of those at some point in terms of bringing critical questions, but politely asking them and giving a little pushback. But overall, I'm like, I don't think most of the world knows about a lot of this information and a lot of the critical scholarship that's out there, and I like to highlight it. So it's kind of a personal journey combined with educating the world, stuff that I didn't know as a Christian that I hope more people do get to know. All right, we're at 1 hour and 13 minutes. I can't even tell you how drenched I am underneath. You'll have to watch my OnlyFans after this stream in order to catch that, okay? Totally kidding. Or not. I'm just kidding. Amber again. Amber saying, thank you so much for the super chat again. Love this. Everyone remember to thumbs up. Thank you. Like the videos. It helps. It's a free way of helping these videos get attention. Like, subscribe, share, comment. All those things help gather more attention and get people more aware of this material. And again, I appreciate the support. Your super chats keep the lights on and allow me to keep doing this. And I cannot tell you how many times I felt very close to the brink and we were able to keep going because of people like you, Amber. So thank you so much. I will try my best to continue as long as I can before I melt in this chair in front of this pool. I kid you not. It probably didn't help that I'm wearing black, obviously, but I've got my tank top here underneath. Let me just keep going. You threw me some money. I don't want to leave you hanging. All right. Let's get into the next one. Zalmoxis. I had to add Zalmoxis, okay? Because the account we have is coming from a skeptic. Herodotus doesn't really buy it, okay? He doesn't believe, but he doesn't not believe. He doesn't really know what to do with it. But I'm curious to know where Herodotus heard about Zalmoxis, and later you get Zalmoxis mentioned as well as a significant figure. So you might go, Zal who? Moxa what? Amoxicillin? The antibiotics? No, the ancient demigod who learned under Pythagoras, okay? Zalmoxis of the Getae. Zalmoxis is the divine or semi-divine figure of the Getae, a Thracian people of the lower Danube region. His story contains what is perhaps the most directly structural parallel to the Jesus resurrection tradition in the ancient world. A teacher of immortality, literally tells them that they will live forever, a 3-year period of being presumed dead, a dramatic return that vindicates his teaching, and rapid transformation of his followers into a community defined by fearlessness in the face of death. Here it is, right? There's much more. I really should have grabbed the whole thing from Zalmoxis because it's a really interesting read. This Zalmoxis had a chamber built in which from time to time he received and feasted all the principal Thracians, using the occasion to teach them that neither he nor they, his boon companions, nor any of their posterity would ever perish, but that they would all go to a place where they would live forever in the enjoyment of every conceivable good. Having established this teaching, Zalmoxis had an underground chamber built, disappeared into it, and for 3 years was believed dead while people mourned him. Then in the 4th year, he came back to the Thracians. In this way, the Thracians came to believe in Zalmoxis and to credit what he taught concerning immortality. I mean, what the? Come on. So, look, I'm just going to read this and then come back to you for a second. The 3-year period, the mourning community, the vindicating return, the instantiation of a community defined by belief in its teacher's authority over death. These are not vague resemblances. They are structural correspondences. Herodotus himself reports both the community's belief and a rationalistic counter-explanation that Zalmoxis simply hid in a cave to trick people and then declines to adjudicate. He is doing exactly what any honest historian should do when confronted with a miraculous claim. The key modern scholarly study is Mircea Eliade's Zalmoxis, the Vanishing God, published by the University of Chicago Press in 1972. Eliade placed Zalmoxis in a broader pattern of shamanic death and return traditions that predate Christianity throughout the ancient world. I really want to come back to you for a second here, okay? I love this story from Herodotus. First off, it's 400 to 500 years prior to Jesus. Let me go. I almost know the section by heart. Herodotus, I wish I had. I know it's book 4, paragraph. Let me just see book 4. I wish there's a free version. University book 4. There should be this free. 94 is where it goes to. How do I get to not the first half, the other half? Herodotus book 4. I really wish my laptop had book 4. Let me just do this. 94 through, I don't know. Let's just do 100. All right, 99. It's past the spot I want. Let me do Herodotus Zalmoxis. So there's got to be a site that has the let's see, section. I want to actually show you 93. So it's chapters 93 to 96 in Herodotus book 4. Okay, here we are. Found it. Okay, this is important. I want you to read this because this is one of the fun ones to me. So we're on PenelopeUChicago.edu website. I'm going to zoom in so we could read this together. 93, right? But before he came to Ister, he first subdued the Getae, who pretend to be immortal. They pretend to be immortal. The Thracians of Salmadisus and of the country above the towns of Apollonia and Mesmambria, who are called Sirmione and Nipsai, surrendered themselves unresisting to Darius. But the Gittae, who are the bravest and most law-abiding of all Thracians, resisted the obstinacy and were enslaved forthwith. As to their claim to be immortal, this is how they show it. They believe that they do not die, but that he who perishes goes to the god Zalmoxis, or Gebelezus, as some of them call him. Once in every 5 years, they choose by lot. Casting lots, we find that all throughout the ancient world, like a random, let the fate of the gods choose who it is, right? Flip a coin, that kind of thing. One of their people, and send him as a messenger to Zalmoxis, charged to tell of their needs. So they're sending someone off to go to Zalmoxis to inform them of their needs. It's kind of like prayers to saints. Think of like how many Christians, specifically Catholics or Orthodox, whatever, who pray to saints, asking them to mediate to the God for their needs, or they pray to Mary, asking her to ask Jesus for their needs to be met. And this is their manner of sending. 3 lances are held by men thereto appointed. Think of giant spears, lances, very, very sharp. Others seize the messenger, the one who the lot cast on. So if we had 5 people out here, we flip a coin, it lands on me. Oh, crap. Now they grab me. They're going to throw me in the air. Okay, so they take this. 3 lances are held by men thereto appointed. Others seize the messenger to Zalmoxis by his hands and feet and swing and hurl him aloft onto the spear points. If he be killed by the cast, they believe that the god regards them with favor. But if he be not killed, they blame the messenger himself. That sucks. Deeming him a bad man, and send another messenger in place of him whom they blame. Think about how ridiculous this sounds. Literally, they throw him onto spears, but if he didn't die and he survives it, he's a bad man. Humans are freaking wild. What do you do with this, right? All right. It is while the man yet lives that they charge him with the message. Moreover, when there is thunder and lightning, these same Thracians shoot arrows skyward as a threat to the god, believing in no other god but their own. Listen to that. This is Herodotus, 5th century. We talk about monotheism. Literally says, moreover, when there is thunder and lightning, these same Thracians shoot arrows skyward as a threat to the god, believing in no other god but their own. Odd. Okay, now we're getting into the juicy stuff. For myself, this is Herodotus speaking, I have been told by the Greeks, hearsay again, right? Maybe trustworthy testimony about the cult, but it's hearsay. I have been told by the Greeks who dwell beside the Hellespont and Pontus that this Zalmoxis was a man who was once a slave in Samos, his master being Pythagoras, son of Menarchus. Presently, after being freed and gaining great wealth, he returned to his own country. Now, Thracians were a meanly living and simple-witted folk. He's saying they're kind of dumb. But this Zalmoxis knew Ionian usages and a fuller way of life than the Thracian, for he had consorted with Greeks, and moreover with one of the greatest Greek teachers, Pythagoras. Wherefore he made himself a hall where he entertained and feasted the chief among his countrymen, and taught them that neither he nor his guests nor any of their descendants should ever die, but that they should go to a place where they would live forever and have all good things. While he was doing, as I have said, and teaching this doctrine, he was all the while making him an underground chamber. When this was finished, he vanished from the sight of the Thracians and descended into the underground chamber, where he lived for 3 years, the Thracians wishing him back and mourning him for dead. Then in the 4th year he appeared to the Thracians, and thus they came to believe what Zalmoxis had told them. Such is the Greek story about him. For myself, I neither disbelieve nor fully believe the tale about Zalmoxis and his underground chamber, but I think that he lived many years before Pythagoras, and whether there was a man called Zalmoxis, or this be a name among the Gittae for a god of their country, I have done with him. So, he goes on to talk about the Persians and continues on with leaving Zalmoxis for good. All right, coming back to you. Interesting stuff. I think Very interesting stuff. He claims that they would have immortality. The Gittai believe there's no other god but this god. They also are fearless in going to death and bringing messages to the god. 3 years, not 3 days, but 3 years. He's in an underground chamber, buried in a sense. They think he's dead. Look at the imagery here, right? And then they believe he's alive. When he comes back, they think he died and somehow came back from the dead, thus vindicating the claim of immortality that he promised them when he would have them in their halls and tell them that them and their children will live forever. Cult 101. Cult 101. Zalmoxis was already doing this 400 and 500 years if the Zalmoxis guy, really, really was existing. But Herodotus is reporting this, right? I just think the more we dig into these sources, the more we get a stronger case on realizing how human all of this really is. And I think that's important, especially if we're going to talk about, look at the Gospels, look at the evidence, eyewitness claims, or this is testimonial evidence. They say these things. I believe their testimony. Well, I have several other accounts we could look to and go, well, do you believe in those? Do you believe that? No, you don't. Okay. I think it's important we factor in these details. So I am melting so bad out here. Let's see how much longer I can go, because I might just do a brush through here, and I need to get this URL out so anyone watching right now can actually go and check out these sources for themselves in this Cleomedes of Astapelea. This is another one. Cleomedes of Astapelea was a man of enormous physical strength who, in a fit of rage, collapsed a school building and killed a room full of children. Now, this is horrible, okay? Pursued, he fled into the temple of Athena and hid inside a chest. When townspeople broke open the chest, he was simply not there, alive or dead. The oracle at Delphi, when consulted, declared him the last of the heroes and instructed the people to worship him as divine. What the hell? But it is what Plutarch does with this case that matters most. In the life of Romulus, immediately after describing the post-death appearance of Romulus to Julius Proculus, an eyewitness of Romulus, Plutarch groups the Romulus tradition explicitly alongside the stories of Aristeas, which we already covered, Cleomedes, and Alcmene, as examples of a recognizable mythological pattern, and then expresses explicit skepticism. Thank you, Plutarch. Many such improbabilities do your fabulous writers relate, deifying creatures naturally mortal. This is a 2nd century CE Greek philosopher explicitly recognizing the genre. He knows the pattern. He is suspicious of the Romulus tradition precisely because it follows a template he has seen repeatedly. The Gospels do this, right? The early Christians knew Plutarch was making this argument. That is why Tertullian, Justin Martyr, and Origen all felt compelled to respond to the parallels directly. The comparison was a live apologetic problem, not because skeptics invented it, but because it was obvious to anyone who read both. The thing is, we don't read both today. We read the Christian story, and we're only fed one text, one narrative, one bubble. We don't actually look at these other ones and go, you know what? Ancient Greeks and Romans did buy these things, did find these things plausible. Maybe educated elites who were like Plutarch, who were very sophisticated, may not have bought into the gullible, typical, everyday cult kind of, myths, fables, stories, tropes, and whatnot. He was educated. He knew a lot more. And there's a book called Did the Greeks Believe Their Myths? And I think it's like a mixed, it depends on who is actually, part of that cult and what they mean by believe, right? This is something Richard C. Miller likes to talk about. He has a different expression of this than what most of the scholars I talk to do, because he thinks a lot of our post-Enlightenment ideas work back onto these texts, and they did not have that same idea about cult, myth, legend, and all of that we do today. Powerful stuff. All right, checking out the chat. What's up, everybody in the chat? Everybody good? Everybody good. Looks like everybody's good. Is everybody having a debate with somebody in the chat right now? There's probably a ton of debates and discussions already happening. All right. I'm going to continue. I didn't miss any super chats, so I wanted to make sure I didn't leave anybody hanging. Good to see you, Chuckles. All right. Going back to what we had. So Asclepius, god of healing, and the Epidaurus inscriptions. This one's so freaking, oh my gosh. I wish we had way more of these kinds of testimonies than we do. And Pausanias said that there were 12 in the ancient world. We only have 2, I believe, of these stones left, the inscriptions from Epidaurus. So Asclepius is a different kind of case because the evidence for post-death encounters with him is not literary legend, but physical inscribed public witness records that survive to this day. According to tradition, attested first in Pindar's Pythian Ode 3, composed around 474 BC, that's way older than Jesus, Asclepius was the son of Apollo and a mortal woman. What? I've never met another person who was the son of a god and a mortal woman. No way. That's never happened. Heck no. Right, everybody? Never. I want to see, like, if the chat's on the same page here. The Mormon atheist, I see you. Hold on. Where are we at? We're debating Isaiah 53, someone said. Okay. What up, D? The Mormon atheist said. Trying to get to you here, just trying to show you some love while I pop in. But yeah, like we've never read anyone else that was born of a deity and a mortal woman, right? I mean, right, everybody? Never heard of it. Never heard of such a thing. This is the first time I'm ever reading about it. I'm sorry, being sarcastic here. All right. He became so skilled as a physician that he could raise the dead. What? No one's ever raised the dead. But no one has ever raised the dead except Elijah, I believe. If it's Elisha, I can't remember which one. They raised a dead person, and maybe both. And Jesus. No one else did. Duh. So why are they saying that Asclepius raised the dead? Zeus struck him with a thunderbolt for this transgression. After his death, he was deified and became the chief of healing god of the Greek world. What followed is not myth, but documented religious. A network of over 300 healing sanctuaries spread across the ancient Mediterranean world. Sick pilgrims underwent a ritual of incubation, sleeping in the sanctuary hall called the Abaton, where Asclepius was believed to appear in dreams and deliver healing. The Lamata or Imata inscriptions at Epidaurus are stone tablets recording the cures pilgrims received. The definitive academic edition is Emma and Ludwig Edelstein's 2-volume Asclepius collection and interpretations of the testimonies, published by Johns Hopkins University Press in 1945, reprinted in 1998. Blind of one eye, she came as a supplicant to the god. As she walked about in the temple, she laughed at some of the cures as incredible and impossible, that the lame and the blind should be healed by merely seeing a dream. In her sleep, she had a vision. It seemed to her that the god stood by her and said he would cure her. After saying this, he cut the diseased eyeball and poured in some drug. When day came, she walked out sound. Wow. These inscriptions are carved testimonies, named witnesses, public displays available for anyone visiting the sanctuary to read. They predate the Gospels. They are more numerous than the resurrection witnesses in 1 Corinthians 15. They include testimony from people across multiple nations. By every criterion the apologist applied to the Jesus tradition, the Epidaurus inscriptions meet or exceed the standard. Every Christian apologist were aware of the Asclepius parallel. In the dialogues of Philostratus by Aeneas of Gaza, the character Eusebius, I'm probably butchering this, explicitly cites the resurrections performed by Asclepius as precedent for making the Christian resurrection claim plausible. What is there to surprise you in what the Christians say about Jesus when you recall Philostratus raising Glaucus, Asclepius raising Hippolytus or Tyndarus, and Heracles raising Alcestis? So there's 3 different people doing resurrections in the Greek world, Roman Greek world. Asclepius one. Well, he raised 2 different people, depending on the tradition. Again, an early Christian author using the Asclepius tradition, not to deny the parallel, but to leverage it. My goodness, I'm coming back to y'all. Hoping the blind have been healed by this so far, but who knows? We'll need a miracle for some of you. We'll need a miracle. Okay, checking in on everybody. What is up, chat? So we've gone through Romulus. We've gone through Aristeas of Proconesus. We've gone through, who else? Asclepius, Clemedes, Zalmoxis. My ears are sweating too with these headphones. Aristeas, Castor and Pollux during the battle, great battle that so many people saw him, or the twins come and help fight their war and help them win. My goodness. So many so far. Yep. I need a miracle. No, that's what I would need. Oh, for sure. I would need one. People ask me, like, what would it take, Derek, to convince you? I don't know. I've kind of read these stories many times. You know, maybe a miracle, like a real, actual, holy shit kind of situation. I'm keeping it real with y'all. My mother-in-law right now was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. She is literally behind the screen in this bedroom where this live stream's happening, right here behind me. Like, I would need an absolute miracle because I could see, you know, the effects it's having on her health, right? Like, I not just a basic miracle, because then again, I'd be like, well, which God is this? Because there's so many gods out there that have done miracles. But like, really tell me and show me it's you, right? It's you. And then I might go, well, how do I know that it's not like many gods, polytheism or something? Like, what if the world's full of people who have this ability? What if science discovers that there's been a way to do things that we haven't tapped into yet? Just saying, like, I'm a skeptic. I'm a gadfly. I'm annoying, like Socrates. I wanna bug you. Bzzz. I just want to bug you, right? That's just how I roll. Yeah, thank you so much, Chris. I really appreciate that. Yeah, I really wish this stuff was true. Like, I legitimately wish this was true in the sense that we could do this stuff. Like, you don't think I want my loved ones to extend their lives or to have like really long lives? And like, no, I just think that humans write stories that paint these kind of wishes. I got a bee trying to mess with me out here. All right. Anyway. What do you do? All right, we're going back. I'm going to skim. I can't tell you how dehydrated I probably am, even drinking this water. So let me skim through some of this, right? We have, and I'm probably going to butcher the name, Protesilaus, okay? Protesilaus, and I hope I'm saying that correct. The dead hero who kept appearing. This is one. Empedocles, the vanishing philosopher. Pythagoras, and I'll when I go to do the documentary, I'll probably pad these out a little more. But then again, it's a lot of work to edit all these documentaries. So anyway, the divine philosopher, he's another one. Yeah, anyway, we can keep going and going. Really need to check him out. Julius Caesar, son of God. Augustus and the sworn Senate witness. So literally there's someone who sees him ascend to heaven. There's even post-mortem road appearances. That stuff's going to be covered when we do Richard C. Miller interview coming up. Vespasian and the healing miracles of Alexandria. Just thought I'd bring that up because it's contemporaneous and there are several sources that talk about his healing miracles that he claims to be able to do. Apollonius of Tyana is another one that we need to talk about. And of course, what do Christians do? Oh, the source for that is later. But then they can make 30, 40, 50, 60-year-old gospels. And I say just giving you like a window. It could even be longer than that because some actually scholars do date some of these gospels into the 2nd century, which would then put them at least from the time of Jesus, 70 years or more. Like what's Sure, 120 years is 50 years longer than 70, right? But 70 years or 30 years is still a long time. Like, I am 37 years in my life, 37 years old, okay? A lot of shit has happened in my life. I could easily see so much happen in 5 years. And of course, apologists just act like, well, because this one's closer, this makes it superior. And it's like, we could dismiss the others. I think that's horseshit, man. Because if you go to like Lucian of Samosata and look at the eyewitness claims of Peregrinus, for example, even as he's a skeptic, Lucian says people saw Peregrinus after he jumped on the pyre, burns to death, and then they see him ascend like a falcon to heaven, and with a human voice in the form of a falcon cries out, "To Olympus I fare, I'm done with the mortal realm. I'm going to Olympus," as if he was divine. And there's like earthquake episodes and all that. Same thing you find with the Gospels. This was written around this guy was there at the death of Peregrinus. And of course, people were saying they saw this, but he made up the story. I'm thinking to myself, my God, it was the next day. If you go read this, it's all free on Google. You just on the YouTube or on the internet, just type in Lucian of Samosata, Peregrinus. Proteus Peregrinus, Perigrinus. Lucian of Samosata tells you he made up the story, and the next day, an old confident man speaking says he saw him with his own eyes ascend. Like, it took one day, not 30 years of storytelling, not 70 years, not 150 years, one day, and the legend was already set. Why aren't we being more skeptical? Is there something else going on? Something else must be going on. Anyway, I brought up Peregrinus Proteus and the witnessed deification, the Jewish traditions, Enoch, Elijah, and Moses, Elisha's bones in Matthew 27 resurrection, Antinous, the most recently deified, which goes into Hadrian and talks about his lover and how that cult spread across the Roman world with, I can't remember, 40 to 70 like cult centers and buildings and all sorts of stuff. Like, this was serious. The apparitions, which I'm going to have to get into this whole Zotan apparitions thing, because Cameron Bertuzzi from Capturing Christianity constantly throws this up. Like, you don't have justified reason to not believe in Christianity if you haven't investigated this deeply to prove this miracle that happened with so many witnesses. And so I'm going to have to dissect this and look at it critically, of course. The Book of Mormon witnesses, that's another one when they say no one would die for a lie, right? What about Joseph Smith? Did he make up stuff? Do you think he really authentically saw golden plates or really? I mean, like, and he became a martyr in the tradition of Mormonism and got killed in a prison in the town over. 150 to 200 people mobbed the prison and killed him. He didn't recant. Hey, I made this shit up. Chill. I made it up. I'm sorry. No. The other problem that I bring into this whole thing is the idea of the special pleading, right? I go into special pleading, the timing argument, the no motive argument, the motive part. Oh God, that's a whole nother, like, I need to expand on all of these. The no body argument, Paul met Peter argument. And then I also go in, I'm just going to come back to you. I also want to go into, they died for the belief, and how legendary that huge expanded legendary tradition is, that they died for this. They died not willing to recant Jesus and that he really rose from the dead and all of that. That's a whole nother thing, because they go, well, they wouldn't be willing to die for a lie. Assuming they died for the truth, they died, assuming they died, and that the traditions are true when they're all legendary that we practically have. I mean, you might say there's some truth to someone like Paul being martyred, but like, why? Well, there are traditions about that. We don't really even know the real reasons they died. Like, as if, oh, we're all dying because we won't say Jesus didn't rise from the dead. The evidence is so overwhelming that we won't say he didn't rise from the dead. He physically appeared to. No, we don't get that. So there's all sorts of stuff you have to unpack because they make a cumulative case. And and I think of Brandolini's law, for those who don't know, it takes an order of magnitude longer or more material, if you will, to unravel bullshit than it is to create it, to unravel nonsense than it is to create it. My job is much harder than just making up stuff or just, trying to throw out what people want to be true. My job is trying to dissect and unravel and help people see all of the sources and to try and consider all of the evidence. And when you do consider all of the evidence, confidence should go down. If you want to continue believing, go for it. You have that right? I'm not taking it away. But the evidence is not what has been claimed, in my opinion, based on the apologists. It is not so convincing that I should take my entire life and devote it to this. There's too much now. I know too much. Keeping it real with you. I just know way too much about all of these different things to just pretend the Christians aren't also fabricating stuff, fabricating eyewitnesses, or even having visions like many humans in the world have, and yet maybe wrong. Not maybe, are likely misperceived. It seems like it's all human, ladies and gentlemen. Even though we like to play with these myths, we like to find meaning and value in stories, and I don't want to knock that, but because it's weaponized and abusing people with hell and torture and all these do this or else something's going to happen and it's not going to be good. And even the not eternal conscious torment hell version, but the annihilationalist version, right? You still suffer for a while until you're completely disintegrated and out of existence. However that's supposed to happen, that's still a threat. You don't get to enjoy this life, this after, whatever the after is. You're going to be part of the naysayers, the bad people, and we're going to put you. That's a softening blow. Even if it is accurate, it's still a softening blow to the realization of the bullshit story that we tell ourselves to scare people, and also to try and justify why some people didn't have justice in this life. And I think we need to stop telling such stories. I do find them abusive, not only to adults, but children. Nicole, thank you. Nicole So Rich, thank you for the super chat. I really appreciate it. Think about it. If you had lied to so many people, including telling people lying is a sin, wouldn't you rather die than tell the truth? This is a good one. Like imagine, okay. I'm trying to think of a modern example. I don't want to get into politics because that one's too easy, okay? And it creates such freaking bullshit. But let's just say there's a really well-known liar, okay? And they lie a lot. And they know they're lying. They know they're lying, but they're willing to go to the grave lying. How many people do we know that are willing to go to the grave and lie and not tell the truth? That when you really think about that, I think that's important. Now, now to give some kind of, I'm not trying to pretend that that's the case, because here's my opinion. I'm going to give you my opinion. You might have a different opinion, Nicole, and that's fine. I really appreciate the support. I think it's more probable, if I were to paint a scenario, that people would go to their death not for a lie, right? That's a more likely scenario in my view. But you can't rule out that people are willing to die for lies. You can't. And what they'll do is say, well, they don't know that they're lies. How many secrets do you have, for example, let's just say, that if someone tried to accuse you of, you might be willing to go to the grave with? You know what I mean? Just saying. Some people might. Not everyone's as courageous maybe to face death that way. But then there's also, as I was bringing up in this book, and Nicole, I think you'll enjoy this episode with this scholar. He's brilliant, such a fantastic human being, first century radical, that the fourth philosophy that Josephus talks about, other than the Essenes, the Pharisees, and the Sadducees, they were tortured to death and would not recant. They were hardcore Jewish nationalists in the first century that literally went to their deaths for this noble cause. So what if Christians had different things they saw as noble beliefs, but it wasn't necessarily the ontological claim of the resurrection evidence that did it? There were other factors in their willingness to be martyrs and whatnot. If we need to look at this together. Nicole, you bring up a very interesting point. Let me share my screen and show you Ignatius, letter to the Romans. I do this all the time, but if this is your first time actually seeing it, you might go, damn, that's not looking good. Ignatius was not there, did not actually see the witness. He did not witness the resurrection. He picked it up like we did, through hearsay, through, people passing on the tradition. Okay. Want to make sure everybody can see this. All right. I'm at the newadvent.org. Greeting, Ignatius, who's also called Theophorus, to the church which has obtained mercy through the majesty of the Most High Father and Jesus Christ, his only begotten Son, and the church which beloved, blah, 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 blah. You get it, okay? As a prisoner, I hope to see you. Through prayer to God, I have obtained the privilege of seeing your most worthy faces, and having been granted more than I requested. For I hope, as a prisoner in Jesus Christ, to salute you, if I indeed, it will be the will of God, that I be thought worthy of attaining unto the end. Attaining unto the end? What's this about? What's going on here, Ignatius? Attending to the end? Do not save me from martyrdom. What the hell? Is this a death by cop fetish? For it is not my desire to act towards you as a man pleaser, but as pleasing to God, even as also you please him. For neither shall I ever have such another opportunity of attaining to God, nor will you, if you shall now be silent, ever be entitled to the honor of a better work. For if you are silent concerning me, I shall become God's. But if you show your love to my flesh, I shall again have to run my race. Pray then, do not seek to confer any greater favor upon me than that I be sacrificed to God while the altar is still prepared. I don't see him arguing for a historiological claim of the resurrection of Jesus. I see him just wanting to become a martyr so he can attain to God through this death by cop kind of scenario, and begging them to not try and get him out of it. Chapter 3, pray that I may attain to martyrdom. All right. Chapter 4, allow me to fall prey to the wild beasts. Chapter 5, I desire to die. What the? By death I shall attain true life. I'm not going to read all this. You can go on literally just type on Google Ignatius letter to the Romans. Reason of desiring to die. The prince of this world would fain carry me away and corrupt my disposition toward God. And I'm skipping some nasty stuff of him talking about, like, may bones be crushed. May I become food for the belly of the beast. Some crazy, sick fetish type death martyrdom stuff that he talks about, right? Let none of you, therefore, who are in Rome, help him. Rather be on my side, that is, on the side of God. Do not speak of Jesus Christ, and yet set your desires on the world. Let not envy find a dwelling place among you, nor even should I, when present with you, exhort you to it. Be persuaded to listen to me. Okay, and by the way, in the I want to die passage, and it may be I desire to die here, he says, if they won't, look, may I enjoy the wild beasts. May I enjoy the wild beasts that are prepared for me, and I pray they may be found eager to rush upon me, meaning the wild beasts kill him, which also I will entice to devour me speedily and not deal with me as with some who out of fear they have not touched. So someone got afraid when they were about to die, and they're like, no, please. And they pleaded with him. No. He's saying, I hope they devour me speedily. Now listen to what he says. If they be unwilling to assail me, I will compel them to do so. That's death by cop. That is death by cop, ladies and gentlemen. I will compel them to do so? What the? Where was the strong historiological case for the resurrection in all of that fetishy martyrization texts? Like, he's just, there's some martyrdom complex he has, willing to go to his death. It's a pretty wild text to read, if you ask me. What do you do? What do you do with all that? Pretty crazy, huh? Press 1 if you think that's crazy. If you're even paying attention, press 1 if that sounded pretty cray-cray. And then I'm going to wrap things up because I am melting, y'all. Woo. Soaked. I'm driving home, ladies and gentlemen, tomorrow. We got one from Chris. We got the Marks. We got Amber. We got Tenzin. Thank you. Chuckles. Byron. Good to see you. Some of life's lessons with a 1. 1 crazy. Exit music. Mormon atheist. 1. Right? It's crazy. Shia. Matthew. All these 1s. Thank you. Appreciate y'all paying attention, and I hope it's been somewhat interesting. If you have any super chats or any questions, comments, whatever, go ahead and make them now. I'm going to stick around for just another minute or so. If I see anyone who has any questions for me, anything specific, I'll address it, and then I will be heading off, trying to get some sleep early tonight to wake up and drive. Got a long trip home. And I'll be back in my office doing this and trying to get some documentaries going to try and bring more education. Look, I'm too hot to go through everything that is listed in this, and there is more than I even can cover. There's much more, actually. Heracles needs to get brought up. He resurrects from the dead, also raises people from the dead. There's miracles he does. There's just too much. There's too much to put in a one video. You can't, So I hope this helps. At the very least, gives people more reason to go, hold on. They pretend this is the only one. They pretend this is it, It's crazy. Yeah, thank you so much for the compliment. And get cool. Get some rest. Prepare to get home, Derek. Absolutely. And I'm going to drive safe. I really do appreciate it. Super chat. Amber, thank you so much. Do you think Jesus existed just without the myth? I think Jesus existed. I lean there was probably a guy. I can't prove it, but I have really good reasons to think in my head that they have mythologized this person. But I also understand why the mythicist position exists based on the chronology of Paul being the earliest letters. And if you take that kind of approach, he's a celestial figure in Paul. So how do you get behind Paul, right? How do you get behind him? And this is where I lean. This is a personal opinion of mine, but I lean into thinking there was a historical Jesus. And I actually just because you asked this question, I think it'll be better to say I'm going to put together a video because I think it's important that my viewers, audience understands why. And it's not just, he just says that, but a case as to why I think the way that I think. But I'm not going to do it to try and just attack or try to criticize in a negative way the mythicist. Even though I was a mythicist, I want to make it clear as to why I am convinced that it makes more sense to me. There was a guy and he was mythologized, and there's a lot of stuff there. You can pick it apart. When I bring what I'm saying, everything I say, I can hear the mythicist in me that can go, nope. It could be this, though. It could be that, though. It could be this, though. It could be that. And I understand that. That's the problem with the case. So at the very end of the day, this shouldn't be, I don't like having that division because we both think that the painted picture of Jesus is not the case. A guy walking on water, performing all these miracles, is understood to be a divine son of God, all of that stuff, that he has abilities that are portrayed, that are legendary, that are fictional. I don't buy it. And for that, we have that overlap with the mythicist. And I find it unfortunate that there's always a constant kind of civil war between mythicists and those who are critical historicists versus the full-on maximal historicist or even maximal mythicist. Even Richard Carrier is like, maximal mythicists are conspiracy-minded usually, and they're not really careful, realizing there is a case that could be made. And he says a 1 in 3 chance there was a Jesus. Well, I would probably reverse that order and think 2 and 3 for me. In my mind, I go 2 and 3, but I empathize and sympathize to the whole ordeal because we got a problem. As Lucian says in his writings on how to write history, and of course he puts Thucydides on a pedestal. If you write a text and you want it to be understood as history, but you fill it with legend and fiction and fable and all that, you've committed an unforgivable sin. Because later generations will never know what really happened. Lucian's writing in the early to mid 2nd century CE, at latest 3/4 of the way through the 2nd century. And he is writing, saying anyone who's writing anything that they want people to think happened and fill it with legend, fiction, all that kind of stuff, has committed an unforgivable sin. Because now later generations will never be able to pierce behind it to know what really took place. You know, I don't think that's what the Gospels were doing, but that's a whole nother show. If they were trying to pawn off historiography, as M. David Litwell was saying, they still committed an unforgivable sin because they're writing myths or writing legends, and myths can be defined differently. I've got something coming for the apologist Catholic scholar, Brant Petrie. I believe that's how you pronounce his name. Brant, I believe it is. Where he did a pretty popular video recently trying to address Alex O'Connor. So I'm going to be coming and showing that this guy, it sucks. It feels so dishonest. It's just not, it's not right. The whole genre of biography, as I mentioned at the opening of this video. But yeah, thank you, Amber. Really appreciate the super chat. And thank you. Another super chat by Matthew. Thanks. Hope to hear more. There's much more to come, Matthew. Much, much more. I hope to be able to tell you more, and I hope to learn more because I have a lot to learn. There's so much more to learn about the ancient world that's fascinating, and we're just pretty much sticking in the Greco-Roman world. Like Egypt, my gosh, there's so many treasures in Egypt. I just interviewed, for those who are members of MythVision on the YouTube side, and I'm going to be dropping this on the Patreon side. I have to change the title. The title doesn't emphasize the Egyptian aspects, but I just interviewed a scholar, Darlene, I called her Darlene on the interview. That's where I messed up again. Colleen Darnell, Egyptologist. She's been on several famous, History Channel, all these episodes where we talk about her book, but also the idea of hell comes up in ancient Egypt. The lake of fire is discussed. There is this concept of torture in the afterlife. We talk about Osiris's resurrection and stuff. And she's a very careful scholar. But I mean, I want to get into all this good stuff, Thank you, Matthew, for that super chat. Really appreciate the support. Anyone else before I go? Anyone else? I am checking my messages while I give you an opportunity here. So help you God. Hopefully you can get in here. All right. I think we're good. Ooh, sweating. All right. I appreciate it, everybody. Thanks for being here. Like the video, share the video. Love you too, Bauckham. Really appreciate that. And take care of yourself. Will do. Same with all of you. Please stick around. Thanks, man. Best wishes to your family. Appreciate it. Vin, I get it. Trust me. When you said, no, I got no money for you, I get it. Not everybody can. I get it. We can share these videos for free, like them, all of that stuff. So, hold on, Vin, you're the big YouTube guy, right? You're the guy that has 400,000 subscribers, right? You want to have a televised debate on the topic, homie? Yeah, I think that Vin's got a big YouTube channel, if I'm correct. Help me out. Make sure that this is the same Vin. Yeah, let's do it. Okay, cool. Perfect. So here's what's going to happen. I will set up a stream, Vin, and we'll actually get into the axe situation. We'll argue about this together on stream, and I will make the case as to why axe is after Josephus, Antiquities, 93, 94 AD. I'll invite you on the channel. I'll be in studio. I'll be in a much better place. I'll be well prepared. And I hope you bring your evidence as to why Josephus's axe, the story of Acts, that is Luke Acts, is pre. And I'm going to show you evidence inside that makes no sense as to why it's after. And I can't wait to have you come on. I literally have been at my mother-in-law's this whole time and haven't dealt with that material myself. It's been a minute since I've read up on Steve Mason here, but I would be absolutely thrilled to have you on. And the fact that you have 400,000 subscribers. So I'm really, really excited to actually delve into this. That's really cool. You're a bigger channel. I can't wait to actually dive into that argument over Acts, because I am almost certain that Acts is written after 93, 94 AD. And so we definitely need to hone in on that. And I'll go through the examples in Acts to show you, and the whole world. So if we need to make this something more organized, so we're not talking over each other, we could do that. Or we could just have a informal discussion back and forth where we actually dialogue about these issues and go through the primary source material together. And I will show you why critical scholars are becoming more and more convinced as they're learning about Steve Mason's arguments here. So it'll be really cool to get an audience to check that out. I don't know why the Olivet Discourse would need to be brought in. It's kind of a distraction from Acts itself. So the Olivet Discourse is a whole different discussion we can have as to what clues maybe indicate it's written after 70 AD, but that would be a different topic, completely different topic, from 93 to 94, because you were debating in my comment section under the video I did calling out Wes Huff, and you were trying to say that this 93, 94 is so fringe and out there. I really, really want to hone in on that topic. And then, if we want to, we could go to the Olivet Discourse. Now, in that case, the Olivet Discourse specifically is post 70. So in Mark, Matthew, there's good case to be arguing why the Gospels are written after 70 AD. Acts being 93, 94, which is the thing you argued with me, is what we should be discussing, because that's the thing you actually called me out for. And I hope that you still consider that something worthy of arguing, and not trying to distract and spread out the debate between two different things. We should focus on one at a time. So that's important. It's a fringe view, though. No problem. After that, we'll do a separate show. Cool. Yeah, I don't know how fringe it is. A lot of critical scholars are buying into this. So it may not be mainstream yet, but we shall see. Cool. Yeah, of course. We can do both. Good. All right, that sounds great. We'll absolutely do that, and I can't wait, to have this discussion. And let's try and make it happen. I'd say within the next 30 days for sure. That gives me time to get home, settled. We're back in the rhythm of working where I'm at, and you and I can actually make something happen here where we have a stream where we do it informal or formal. Do you have my email? You can email me directly. I'm going to send my email in the chat. There's my email. And feel free to email me, and we can talk about how you want to go forward. And that will be fun. Cool. Thanks so much, everybody. I'm going to go get some AC and cool down. And until next time, stay tuned. We're going to keep doing this, keep bringing critical scholarship, keep bringing ancient history, show you all of these ancient sources that a lot of people aren't showing. Many of the apologists don't even know about, but even the ones they do, they just try to downplay, dismiss, poo-poo. And when you know them, your confidence in one religion really, if you're honest, starts to diminish. You do not have the same confidence in a historiological case for Christianity. You have faith? Sure, go for it. But the historiological case? Come on. All right, I love you. Till next time, never forget, we are MythVision. See you next time.
Son, do you want to know what the truth is? After this, there's no turning back. You take the blue pill and you wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to. You take the red pill and you stay in Wonderland, and I show you just how deep the rabbit hole goes. Remember, all I'm offering is the truth, nothing more.